when they start writing proposal, they start writing, for example, usually people write, I have seen people who write proposals, but they forget to mention that they're writing it in order to like do a PhD there. So a very traditional structure to begin a proposal is I propose to do something like that, and you should not mention as an introduction. Okay, so these are the first impression. So even before you're going to an interview hall, people read your proposal. I mean, not everyone, but in a panel, at least one or two people usually read your proposal. So even before you appearing before the interview board, they get an idea about you from the proposal. So that is very important to create a very good first impression. Okay, and it sets the interview agenda. So your interview, especially in the case of EFLU PhD, depends on what you have given. They won't ask you anything, or they rarely ask you anything outside the proposal. So it sets the interview agenda. So you should know what you have written, basically. Then it reveals how you think. So there is a way a researcher approaches a problem. Okay? So if you are a good researcher who has a good command, so there is a thought process, right? So if you are kind of leaving gaps behind when you think, or are you trying to think clearly? So a good proposal reflects your thinking, and it also signals fit. It also shows that this proposal belongs to for example, let me share my experience, with these points. For example, in my proposal, I kind of wanted to make this impression that I can really fit the department. So when I applied for multiple places immediately after, okay, immediately after my PG, we went to apply for IITs, for different places. So when we go to different departments, we usually in the paragraph we change according to the specific department and their preferences. You can Google it and to figure out if beyond EFLU, I am sure that you will be applying to multiple places. So before going there, you Google the department and see which teacher has vacancy. And usually in their resume or in their research interest, you can figure out areas that are relatable to your field. So you can use the same terms or similar terms that they have mentioned in their research interest or resume, so that it kind of shows it. Whenever you use the word, they kind of connect to you, and that is in a way important. So that is something about being fit to the department. Okay. Now, imagine the interview board. You're going to the interview. You are like all set. So what does the board expect from you? So this is a very simple trick, okay? Usually we conduct, among our friends, we used to have these mock interviews. So the purpose of a mock interview is that your friends are acting like the interview board. So they give you a version of what the interview board is like, or like you can kind of get inside the mindset of the board. Even though it doesn't work completely, it gives you an idea. So one thing is originality, okay? And usually people kind of struggle a lot with originality. But my suggestion is that you cannot really make an original idea in humanities. In humanities, it's very difficult to have an idea. I mean, you might have felt the same. For example, you might be reading and you really thought that, oh, this is a really nice idea. This is an awesome idea. This is a cool idea. But then you read another article and somebody else already had that idea. So that is a problem, right? So you should not for originality in terms of ideas. You don't have to have original ideas, but you can bring a new perspective and kind of you can make them feel. You can give the feeling that it is something new. So it's not really about generating something new. It's all about give the feel that you're not a very cliche person in terms of your proposal. Then command of the field is very important. That is again another thing, right? So you are simply beginning your research, so you cannot have a full command of the idea. I mean, even after writing the thesis, you may not really have. I mean, in my field, I don't claim that I have a command of the field, but still, in the interview, when you appear there, when you are there in front of the panel, you should at least kind of act like you know what you're doing. So the basic thing is you should know whatever you have written in the proposal and also some basic idea. Then have the confidence in order to present it in a way that appeals. That is another thing. Then feasibility is another matter because it should be feasible. It should be you should be able to complete the research within the specific time limit. Then there is significance. So your research should be significant. It should have some relevance to the department and kind of people who are there. They should feel like it is significant. It is important. And the last part is articulation. This is another thing that happens for many people because they are really good at their research. They know what they have written, but there is this usual first question in the interview that is summarize, not really summarize. So they may ask you, what is your research about? So give a brief idea of your research. People usually fail in that stage because they may not really articulate well. So the panel may think the proposal is written by either AI or somebody else, and this fellow doesn't really know what he or she is talking about. So articulation is really important. So before going to the interview, you should practice, what you're going to say. Now we'll proceed to the actual proposal writing stage. Okay, so these are the parts of the proposal. I'll also show my proposal. I mean, it's not the perfect proposal or anything, but I can kind of show how I wrote, and if you can relate, it can work like a workshop. So it should have a title. So what is a title basically? I mean, we'll explain those aspects later. Okay, so first thing is a title, then introduction and background. So you should have a, I mean, obviously you should have a title, then you should have an introduction and a background, like where you give the idea, where you introduce the idea. Then you should have literature review. All these segments we'll explain in detail, don't worry, but I'm giving an overview. Then there is a research gap, and in humanities, especially in literature domains, research gap is a matter of perspective. So you don't have to worry that there is no objective research gap. So people usually try to imitate science researchers, and then they worry that I don't really see a gap. So in humanities, we don't see a gap. We usually look, and in that look, in our perspective, there is a gap. So a gap is dependent on how we look, and it's a matter of perspective. We'll explain that also. Then you should have research questions, then theoretical framework, methodology, chapter plan, and bibliography. So this is like the overall idea, and yeah, so I'll also share my thesis and give you, like, not my thesis, my proposal to give you an idea. Just switch to that. Okay, I hope you can see my proposal. So yeah, you don't have to title it as a research proposal, that's up to you. Then you should have a title, right? And we'll talk about the title in detail. Then I started with, I propose to do something. And I mean, my thesis is far away. When I submitted, it was far away from what I proposed. So it's just a model. Okay, don't take it as a standard or like a great proposal, but then it will help you to kind of see how it goes. So I propose something, then yeah. So this is the then research questions, then bibliography. So in the case of EFLU, because I applied for comparative literature, they usually prefer something like this. But in some other departments, I think even in the case of literature, and especially if you go to IITs and other places, they want a very structured proposal. In that case, what you can do is, we mentioned these titles, right? So those titles you can give as subheadings, and sometimes institutes give their own proposal model. I think when I was applying this IIT Guwahati had their own proposal model. So like that, people have different models, and a very important thing is there is no standard model. You cannot say that this is the best model for a proposal. There is no standard model. It varies from university to university, professor to professor. For example, my supervisor, she does not like a very structured thing. So that's why I skipped the titles. It is still structured. I didn't go for bullet points for titles because I knew that she prefers it like that, and also the department also in general has that attitude. But if you're going somewhere, they actually want to see everything systematic, everything in order. They're happy if they see many bullet points. If you think that is the vibe of the department, you can go for that. Okay, okay, now I'll go back to the PPT. Okay, so the first part is a title, and just asking to see if you people are here. When do you write it? Is it the beginning, at the beginning of writing a proposal, in the middle, at the end of writing a proposal? I mean, like at what time? I mean, beginning in the sense before writing, after writing, in between writing a proposal, or is it like just before, day before? Okay, so Shruti says tentative title at start. Okay, final title at the middle. Any other opinions? Okay. So usually writing at the end is the best because yeah, exactly. So as Vishal said or Smriti said, we can have a tentative title, but that is just tentative. That helps you to guide your writing. So the nature of a tentative title is it doesn't have to be grammatically perfect. It doesn't have to be doesn't have to look like the very attractive, interesting or anything. You can put some tentative title that refers all the concepts that kind of says what you want to say, and that you can edit later, because as you write your ideas will evolve, and at the end you will have a clear idea. So the tentative title can guide your writing, and then at the end your writing will make a better title. Okay, so you name the topic, the perspective. So the idea is like we have to say all this in one breath, means it has to be it should come in a very short span. So what you're trying to do, the topic, in my case, okay, we'll go there after discussing this, and then it should have a perspective, it should have a scope. So perspective is basically what kind of a method that you're preferring. Then you should avoid abstractions. So avoid very general abstract terms. Avoid terms that you cannot understand. Even after Googling or ChatGPT, if you cannot understand a concept, please don't put that in your proposal. At least avoid that from the title. Okay. And a working title is fine, and that is another thing. You don't have to go there with the best title. You should go there with the title that would give you the seat. and at any point of the research, in the case of EFLU, you can change the title. Okay, so don't worry about the title. When, for example, some people may say, like, if I put a title in this proposal, I have to kind of carry it on for 5 years. You don't have to. You can change it at any point. Okay? Now I'll get to my title. I'll just copy paste my title to text here. So mine was a very kind of a philosophy work. My research was basically on the philosophy of reading. So the first part is dynamic of self and other in the event of reading, a phenomenological inquiry. Okay, so here, can you identify which part talks about the framework? Please respond in the text. Which part of my proposal title refers to the framework? Second part. Yeah, exactly. Second part, right? So it is the phenomenological inquiry part. It is usually the case. That is a kind of a norm. First, we say that what exactly are you looking at? Then you say you are looking at that using this and this. Okay. So in my case, I am saying I am looking at the dynamics of self-analysis in the event of reading and a phenomenological inquiry. In my case, I didn't have a primary test as such, so I didn't mention that. But most of you will be having primary tests, primary like authors who have written those primary texts. Then you have to mention that. Okay, so always aim for specificity. So instead of saying Indian literature, you can say like modern Indian literature. That is more specific, right? Instead of saying female writers, you can say like South Asian female writers, or like, I mean, it has to be more specific. So that is an issue. So usually the interview panel will immediately ask you, if you put a very general title. For example, I went there with the title post-colonial studies in Indian literature. So they'll ask you, what do you mean by Indian literature? How are you going to survey the whole Indian literature within 5 years? So that I cannot answer, right? So you should have a specific feasible limit in terms of time, period, and geography. A working title is fine. Yeah, among these two, gender in modern literature and performing gender, domestic, like the second one. You can see at the bottom of the slide. Which one is better title? You can see it, right? I mean, I hope. There are two, like, inside quotes, you can see two titles. Okay, let me say second one. Yeah, so what makes the second one a better title? Because the first one says gender in modern literature. As I said, you cannot finish a research on gender in modern literature, right? But the second one clearly says performing gender. So you're not talking about gender in general. You are talking about the performance part of gender, like a Judith Butler kind of a performativity. It can be any other. Yeah, I'm just giving an example. Then your domestic space in selected novels of a specific author, and that also within 1990 to 2010. But one issue with this title is it can be too narrow, right? If you're taking just one author, it may not be good for a research. So you can keep like one or two, three authors, or you can keep a specific geography from where you can mention this. Okay. Then introduction. So yeah, it is specific and it doesn't really appear vague. It's more like, yes. Introduction. This is like this pyramid structure you can see, right? Inverted pyramid. So that is a general structure for a good introduction. A good introduction usually talks about a broad field. In that, it brings down to specific areas. Then it talks about your problem. Okay. So, for example, you can say that in the literature, like the feminist Indian literature has witnessed many emerging feminist narratives in the modern era. So that is a general statement, and that refers to a broad field. In that broad field, you can kind of narrow it down to a specific area, and in that area, you are looking for a specific problem. Okay, so imagine or like kind of think of this inverted pyramid structure when you write when you write an introduction. So open with the broad area matter and narrow steadily down to specific text or phenomenon. Then end with a clear problem statement. Keep it short. Okay, in my case, there was one exception. So though this is like I'm just giving you the standard model, but in my case, what I did was I just started with my research statement immediately because the main reason for that is like usually imagine a panel, okay, panel of 8 people. Usually they read like the first sentence, first 2 3 sentences, and then the rest they scan. So what they actually read from your proposal is like maybe 1 or 2 sentences. Those who haven't read it before. So imagine there is 8 people, okay, like 8 people in your interview panel. In the 8 people, maybe 2 3 people might have read it before, and they will have a clear idea about your proposal. And there will be people who are reading it on spot. Okay, so basically, you will be giving the copies of proposal to them, and on spot they will be reading. So those people they won't really care about reading the first paragraph. Instead, they'll be reading the first 1 or 2 sentences, then scanning through the rest of the proposal. So keeping that in mind, I kind of opened it. I proposed to explore the self and the dynamics. That again is better. I tried to copy at least. I think the first part will come. Yeah, so you can see it here, right? So in the event of literary reading, so I'm saying what I am going to do. So you can see it in the text, I hope, because I don't want to change the slide always. Extending the ideas of Martin Buber, I propose that self and other interaction in the event of reading ensembles with I and thou interaction. In the reading, the reader infers the presence of an author. The reader enters to special relation with the text. So here I am talking about the specific area. Basically, I'm talking about the method. Okay, and the reader assumes the role of self in the dialogue and like all these things. So what I did is I began with the research statement and then kind of gave the area and the theme. So that is another way. But once again, what I have showed in the slide is the standard way. The second one is you can modify it depending on your audience. Okay, in some universities, all of them read. So especially if it's an abroad university, they usually read, they prepare notes from your proposal and come. In that case, this is not an issue. You can stick to the standard model. Okay. Yeah, then literature review is another thing. So
how you pronounce resume depends entirely
literature
on
review
its
is
meaning and how it is
basically
used in
a
a
way
sentence.
of showing them that you actually know what you're doing. Okay? So the interview panel will be very skeptical of you usually, and also there is this thing, no, like they're usually very senior professors who have been doing their work in those fields for years, and you are there coming with something new in their field. So they'll always look at you with a certain skepticism, and they will be like kind of questioning if you know enough about the topic. Okay, and this happens a lot in EFLU, and please don't worry, that is the default state of uh, interaction there. So I mean that's like, for example, in my interview, a professor asked me, can you actually finish it in 5 years? And then he told me, I don't think you can. So I mean it went on like that. Basically it was a way of showing his command in the field and kind of establishing that he knows more than me, and that is definitely true. So you have to expect this kind of a scenario. But literature review is a place where you can at least show that you know what you're talking about, you know what you are going, like you know what you're trying to present. So you can group the sources by theme or theme. For example, you are saying that in this field, so basically the idea of literature review is that all the previous work or the relevant previous works related to your proposal. You can say that this fellow has done this work in my area, and etc., etc. Then you have to identify major positions or schools. That is more important than specific authors. Okay, you may not need to know all the authors and writers in your field, but you should know the major trends. You should know the major schools. You should know that there are these debates and arguments going on. So that is a basic thing. And you should say that critics have agreed, disagreed, then they left something out, etc., etc. Then you should end the research review showing your gap, showing the gap. So basically, you are saying, before me, this and these people have done this work like this and these ways, in this and this manner, but there is something else that I noticed, and I wanted to do something on that. So that is the you're pointing out the gap. And yeah, so this is the idea of a research gap. Once again, in humanities, people tend to worry about an objective research gap. For example, in the case of science, uh, before the before somebody finding the atomic formula of H2O or oxygen, that was a gap. They didn't know what it is, and you have to fill that gap with an invention or an information. So that is a solid gap. You can say that that's an objective gap. In the case of humanities, we are not inventing atomic formulas. We are not inventing new elements, right? Instead, we are bringing new perspectives. We are bringing new ways to think about problems. We are bringing solution by bringing perspectives. So, the research gap is a matter of perspective. That is the basic thing, and so that you don't have to worry about a science like gap. Some people ask about that, so that's why I'm mentioning that. Then this is like this sentence is kind of an example. While critique or school or group of people or scholars have examined this, little attention has been paid to this, especially through this lens. Okay, and this is always the case. Whichever critical theory you take, whichever school you take, whichever work you take, there is always some scope to look at a work through a new lens. Okay, so it can be an underread text or author. It can be a comparative or cross-linguistic angle. People may not have seen something in comparison to something else. A familiar text through a new theoretical lens. So the text is very familiar, much worked on. People have done a lot of work on that text, but you're bringing a new lens. You're bringing a new perspective. Then it can be a marginalized voice, because we have talked about it a lot, but all that was through the dominant voice. But there is something that we haven't noticed, and that is marginalized. Okay, now we have research questions. So research question also usually have a structure. So yeah, after discussing it, I'll show my research questions. So what do you want to find out? So usually there is a main question. That is the normal pattern. Again, you can break from the pattern. So the main question is, what exactly do you want to find out? What exactly do you want to figure out? What exactly do you want to do with your thesis? So that's the main question. Then there are like objectives, for questions following that. There can be focused questions, there can be answerable questions, original questions, open-ended questions. I mean, and you don't really have to answer the questions also. Sometimes people think like that. the research questions, I should be able to answer all the research questions while writing the proposal. That is not the case, right? The whole research is to figure out the answers to the research questions. So you don't really have to worry about the answers to the research questions, but you should know what the questions are. You should know the method to reach the answer. Okay. So one question can be like, this is an example, okay? How a specific author represent a specific theme through a specific device or a perspective, whatever it is. Then there can be sub questions that can break the main question to workable parts. It doesn't have to be like this, but usually there is a key question that is directly from the abstract or introduction part of your research proposal. Okay. Then there should be a framework. So this is a question that usually asked in the interview. What is the framework? What is the method that you want to use? So there are different, well-known frameworks. Particularly, I am not a fan of literary theory, but then, we can kind of transcend theory in our work. So that's the idea. So you can begin with any of these known theories or frameworks or something that is new. Now we have a lot of, ocean studies, blue humanities, all this. And after AI, there is a bunch of other AI stuff also. So that you can figure out and like keep that answer always in mind. So if somebody asks you, what is the method, what is the framework, you should have an answer. And a framework should illuminate the text. It should kind of bring more clarity to the proposal. Okay, sometimes what happens is that just for the sake of adding a framework or a critical theory, people add random theories. They Google, then they find out some names, they put it in the proposal, and that kind of negatively impacts the clarity. And after adding the framework, the proposal has become very difficult to understand. You have lost the clarity. So add a framework in such a way that increases the clarity of what you are trying to say, that strengthens your argument. So that should be a good framework. Don't add a framework just for the sake of it, but you should have one or two critical frameworks in your proposal. Otherwise, it's a very weak proposal. Even if you have a very good idea that is your own, you need some other scholars supporting your ideas. So that is basically the idea of a framework. Okay. And yeah, uh, in the case of a methodology, it is broader than framework. So framework is usually critical framework or critical theory, whatever it is. But when it comes to method, the usual method is textual reading, textual analysis. This is also a common question, okay? People ask in interviews, especially if there is usually one or two externals in the interview. Externals in the sense they won't be from the department, they'll be outside the specific department. And in that case, it can be like close reading or text. In that case, they'll ask, what is your research method? Okay? So you can say it is close reading, or it is textual reading, or it's like textual analysis is a very generic and often satisfiable answer. Then archival research is there. If you're doing something related to archives, that is a solid answer. Comparative analysis is a method, and also it kind of overlaps with textual analysis depending on what you're doing. Then discourse analysis is a method. Linguistic analysis is a method. So again, once again, figure out an answer if somebody asks you what is a method, that you have to mention in the proposal also, because that is usually pointed out as a negative thing. We write a proposal, but we forget to add just one or two lines or one or two sentences explaining what is your method. You should make sure that you have it in your proposal. Okay. Yeah, then research plan. For EFLU, research plan is not a necessary thing. I didn't have a research plan. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show my research questions. So we'll pause here and I'll just show my research questions. Yeah, so these were my research question. So research objectives and questions. So it doesn't have to be like a question. You can talk about it as objectives also. I hope you can see it, right? So to explore the dynamic nature of subjecthood in relation between reader and author in the event of reading. To compare the event of reading with I and oral. So that's like about the method to seek possible adaptations of intersubjective perception in the event of reading and social interaction. So like these two things are basically what I am trying to do. I am doing this research to explore this, to compare this, to seek this, etc. Then there are two questions. So you can also like make it two titles. As I told you before, if you're giving it to a department that prefers a lot of structured, systematic stuff, you can make research objective, then research questions. Okay. So in my case, what happened is that basically when I thought of writing research questions, I couldn't figure out many questions. So I thought of just keeping the title like this and combining objectives with questions. Okay. So the question, like first research question is, in reading the reader engaged in a symbiotic non-reductive interaction with the other, can she sustain the subjective nature of this dialogue in other social relation? Basically, the idea is like in reading, we have a very kind of non-reductive relation with the text. But does that mean I can have a non-reductive relation with other individuals after the reading or like once the reading finishes? Then how can the aesthetic experience? Okay, so this is to give you yeah, simple, and that's what I'm saying. Like you can write it separately if you are submitting it to a place that prefers text. I think in the case of EFLU, it's better to keep it separate. Uh, in my case, I was applying to comparative research, and especially I knew like I mean I wanted a particular professor to be my supervisor, and I knew that she does not prefer a lot of because she does not like too much structured kind of work. So I kept it like this. Okay, so you should do a research about the people in the panel that you can ask your friends in IFLU. Or you can, I mean, the basic thing you can do is like you can go to the IFLU website, read their profiles, etc. Okay, now we'll go back to the PPT. Okay, so this is the research plan. And so the idea is like it's better to include it in the proposal, but okay, so we'll take. I mean, you can post the questions now also if something comes to your mind. I'll take everything towards the end, okay? And that I'll talk about it. So first, let me finish it. So research plan, introduction framework. This is like a typical research plan, which most of the theses follow. So usually they talk about the introduction and the framework. Framework as in criticism. In my thesis also, the first chapter was the chapter on critical theory. Okay, and then literary review is there. So that is another thing. Like you have to talk about people who have done it before, like done the research before you, and like discussions in the area. And as I told you, you should know about the trends and discussions. Analysis 1, analysis 2, which is usually the primary work part, wherever you are analyzing the primary work using your framework that you talked about in the first chapter. Then fifth chapter is the conclusion. This is like a normal research plan. So if you have to include a research plan, or if you wish to include a research plan in your proposal, don't worry, you can follow this plan easily. Just think about your topic in these lines, and you can make a plan for 5. It's not a big deal, so you can follow this process. Then you can think of a tentative timeline. That's also a requirement, like a standard requirement in the abstract, sorry, in the proposal. In my case, I did not have these things because I knew that the department is not really concerned about those. But still, I had to face questions about my research plan and timeline. So even if you don't have research plan and timeline in your proposal, it's ideally you should have it in the proposal. But even if you don't have it, you should have an idea because they will ask about it. So in the like this is a 3-year plan because ideally they prefer people who are going to submit in 3 years, but nobody submits in 3 years. Okay, that is the reality. But while joining, we all will start with why just 2 years. In the 3 year, I'll be just relaxing and submitting. But that never happens. Usually, people take 5 years, especially if they have JRF, will go for the full month. But when you present before the panel, you have to present a 3-year plan. Especially after NDP, there is more pressure on this, 3-year things. So first year is for coursework and reading. Second year, primary analysis and drafting. And third year is for writing, revision, and submission. Okay. So in case if they ask you what is the plan for year 1, then what are you going to do in year 2? So you should know, I mean, that's again a place where you are showing that, I know what I'm going to do. So you should have that confidence and you should be able to say it. Okay. And once again, these things don't take a lot of preparation, and these things don't take a lot of learning or anything. It won't even take a lot of your time also, but being mindful of this will make a big difference in your interview. Okay, then bibliography. So you should have a mix of primary and secondary. Usually that is the case, or you can have separate titles. Again, depending on how structured you want it to be. Okay? Separate title for primary, then another title for secondary, and stay current. So you should not be giving all the Plato, Aristotle, pre-modern works. You should also have works from contemporary, like after 2000, include some. So just when you prepare the bibliography, think of that also. It's not like all old works. Okay? Then keep it focused. So you don't have to have bibliography across different fields. So this is another thing. Some professors look at your bibliography to assess the quality of your work, and they may also ask questions from bibliography. So if you have listed one book, one article, or anything else in bibliography, you should know what it is. Okay, so you should not have anything that is unfamiliar in the bibliography. And the other thing is like, they judge the bibliography, like they judge you on the basis of the bibliography. Because if you have actually read, if you have actually gone through your resources, that means that you know what you're saying. Okay. Then be consistent. Consistent in the sense style. That's another issue. Most of the time, people don't really mind the style of bibliography. It has to be MLA, so it should be like MLA 9 or 8. So it's up to you. So, but stick to the MLA style. That is what preferred by EFLU. And if you are going somewhere else, look at them. Like you can ask the students there, or sometimes they tell you. So about what do they prefer. Okay. So be consistent with the style. Don't just make a bullet list of your work or article. So that is another thing. Okay. Okay, yeah, if you have MLA 7, it's fine. I mean, there is between MLA 7, 8, and 9, there are only some differences. Yes, that I forgot to mention. Thank you, Vishal. It's like for the linguistics, it is usually AP. Okay. And again, please keep the preference of the department in mind. You should have a style. That is the most important thing. I have seen many people going there with just numbered bullet point list of, just titles of the work and all. But that is a very bad, that gives a very bad impression of your research. Yeah, so these are the things that can go wrong when you write a proposal. It can be too broad, and they will ask you, are you doing this as a lifelong project or is it a research? So don't make it like that. And also there should be focus. Okay. Then merely descriptive. Don't make it merely descriptive. Like make a summary. It should have an action plan. It should feel like you're going to do this instead of describing it. Then you should have a clear method. You should have a plan on how to do the research. Then that's another issue, false originality. And sometimes people do that, they come and claim that, I am the first researcher in this field, but there are like 2 3 people who have already done the work. So the first thing is, you don't have to be obsessed with originality. Second, if you claim any kind of originality, please make sure that it is actually original. Okay? Then you can't defend it. That's another problem. I mean, that's like, there should be some questions that you are unable to answer, but you should not give the impression that you have no idea about your proposal. Okay, so it is okay to leave some questions, or it's okay to say that you don't really know all the answers because you are at the beginning of your research, right? And if you already know all the answers, then you don't have to do the research. So that's a very logical thing. So you don't have to worry about leaving some questions unanswered. Then the last bit is interview. You should know every claim on every page. You wrote it, so you must defend it. And then rehearse. Why you choose a specific. So these are the normal questions. There are many why questions that can be very challenging. Why you chose the specific text, and why you chose the specific framework, critical framework, and why is it feasible? Why are you saying that it is possible? What if you're wrong? What if that is not the case? Then you should acknowledge your limitations confidently, because all research, especially at the very beginning, have a number of limitations. So it's not a problem to have limitations, but you should know what you're doing. Okay. Then practice explaining your idea in 1 minute in plain language. Like in the case of EFLU, you can make it 2 minutes. Okay, so you should be able to articulate the whole research idea in 2 minutes, because if you prepare for a 5 minutes thing, there should be some professor who has no patience, and they like cut you off, in between. Okay, now let's start the question. So 2 minutes is kind of a safe zone as far as I understand. Yeah, so yeah, that's it. And we'll quickly take the questions. So we only have some questions. We'll go there. Okay, yeah, word limit. I don't really want to mention a specific word limit. That's why I didn't include it in the PPT. But my personal suggestion is to keep it to 2 pages, 3 pages, like that. Like maybe 2 pages fine. Mm, yeah, maximum 4 pages, because more than four people don't really read. And you can go for like 4 pages content and bibliography. That's also fine. Okay, but if it's like more than 4 or 5, it will be less readable. So keeping the readability factor in mind, I would say keep it very short. In my case, it was 3 pages. So including the bibliography. So my research proposal was 2 pages, then bibliography was 1 page. So if you can articulate all your ideas clearly and effectively within 2 pages, that is the best thing. Okay. So and once again, sometimes departments want to see many pages, so that you can nicely ask people there, your seniors. In the case of people are not generally obsessed with page numbers. So then abstract, some people show abstracts at the beginning, but it's not really a requirement, because your whole research proposal itself is an abstract to your research. So that is personally my logic. You don't really need an abstract in a research proposal, because a research proposal itself is an abstract. But there are some people who keep a very short summary of your report in 1 or 2 paragraphs at the very beginning. It's fine. If you want to keep it, you can do it. But it will add to the length. That's another thing. So that is totally up to you. In the case of EFLU, it's not really necessary. But if you feel like that will add to your performance. And structure and proposal, okay. I just quickly go back
One
there.
second, can you please share that link?
Can you please repeat? I didn't get you. Pardon.
Hello,
Yes, yes.
sir.
Yes, Malesh. Yeah.
Actually, we just joined for 5 minutes. Can you that structure of the uh, presentation
Okay, wait.
was actually?
So I'll just go through the slides. So this is the basic structure. You should have a title, introduction, and background. That is the first paragraph. Then literature review. Usually the third paragraph or second paragraph. If your intro is first one, only one paragraph. Then research, yeah, research questions and objectives. Then theoretical framework, methodology, chapter plan, and bibliography. Okay. Then in the case of title, we said it should clearly show the perspective, topic, etc. And it should be specific. That's the most important thing. Then introduction, the structure is you give a broad field, then specify the area, then you have a problem. Like an inverted pyramid structure. But my personal suggestion, as I did in my proposal, is you can also begin with your thesis statement or your research question, whatever you call it. Then literature review is most probably the third paragraph. So where you talk about people who have done work in your field. Even though you don't mention all people, you should know all the major trends, major schools, etc. Then research.
Sir, in this review of literature, hello, sir.
Yeah,
I
review
have a
literature.
one doubt about the review of literature. Actually, the review of literature we should write together or separate, like in the box, like in the column, like that we should follow, or like how should we write? For example, I refer like more than 20 articles like that. So together I should write or separate I should, because if I will write separate, it may take like more pages like that. So how should I write reviews?
Okay, so if you are applying for ELE or linguistics, I would suggest separate would be better. But for literature departments, I think if you write it together, so you're not really talking about, this person has done this work before me. We're not doing that. In the case of literature departments, you're saying that this person has done work in relation to another person and that fellow has done this, so they have together done this. So like in the case of literature departments, it's better to keep them like as a paragraph, because you are not referring to particular people or their work. Instead, you are trying to put people and works in a larger context. Okay, and that context is a literature review. But in the case of ELE and linguistics, I think you might and
Your voice is breaking too much.
Voice is breaking, sir. sir, it is still the same. Your voice is breaking.